Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really tough opponent in the world of infections, tuberculosis, TB.
That's right. It's an infection that demands some serious long-term pharmacology.
Exactly. And we've been digging into the source material on the key drug strategies, how they work, and critically, the nursing considerations needed to guide patients through treatment safely.
It's important to set the stage, understand what we're fighting. TB is caused by Mycobacterium species, mostly Mycobacterium tuberculosis.
And that's an aerobic bacillus, right? Needs oxygen.
Precisely. It thrives in oxygen-rich environments. That's why the lungs are the prime target. But, it can also infect bones, even the brain.
And the body tries to fight back, forming these characteristic lesions.
Yes, the granulomas. The body essentially tries to wall off the bacteria. It forms these dense, nodular clumps of inflammatory cells.
And the center can get sort of nasty.
It often becomes caseated, breaks down, and looks a bit like cheese.
Yeah.
But the wall isn't always enough to kill the bacteria inside. They can just sit there.
Which leads us straight into why TB is so pharmacologically difficult. It's not just the wall, it's the bug itself, isn't it? It's a slow grower.
That's the absolute key challenge. Because it grows so slowly, its metabolic activity is low.
And most antibiotics, the bactericidal ones, they work best against rapidly dividing cells.
Exactly. They disrupt those fast processes. So with slow-growing TB bacilli, many of our drugs end up being bacteriostatic.
Meaning they just inhibit growth, they don't necessarily kill the bacteria outright.
Correct. Which is why treatment has to be so long and why combinations are essential.
Okay, so long treatment. What happens if patients understandably struggle with that? If adherence slips?
That's how we get resistance. And it's a huge problem. We see MDR-TB, multidrug-resistant TB.
That's resistance to the two mainstays, isoniazid and rifampin.
Yes. And even scarier is XDR-TB, extensively drug-resistant TB, which resists almost everything, first and second-line drugs.
Wow. Given that TB is still a massive global killer, right behind HIV from a single infectious agent perspective, adherence is paramount.
Absolutely critical. Failure isn't really an option we like to contemplate.
So let's dive into the drugs we use for this fight. The sources usually break them down into two main groups.
That's right. We have the primary or first-line drugs. These are the workhorses. Isoniazid, often called INH, rifampin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol.
The big four.
The big four. Then you have the secondary or second-line drugs. These are generally held in reserve.
For tougher cases, like resistance.
Exactly. For complicated cases, resistant strains. Drugs like bedaquiline or capreomycin fall into this category. They often come with more toxicity concerns, too.
Okay, so imagine a patient comes in suspected active TB.
Yeah.
You can't wait weeks for a culture. What's the immediate game plan?
You hit it hard and fast. Standard protocol is to start a 4-drug regimen immediately, usually INH, rifampin, pyrazinamide, and ethambutol. Sometimes streptomycin might swap in for ethambutol.
So combination therapy right out of the gate.
Yes, this gives you about a 95% effectiveness rate against susceptible strains. You use this combo until you get the drug susceptibility results back.
Which takes time because the bug grows so slowly.
Right. Once you have those results, you can then tailor the regimen, maybe narrow it down if possible. But the key is that initial aggressive approach.
And the duration. It's long.
Very long. Successful treatment means taking multiple drugs for at least 6 months. Sometimes it stretches out to 12 months, or even longer for complex cases.
That's a huge commitment. Before we get deeper into the drugs, you mentioned diagnosis. Can you quickly walk us through those steps? How do we get to that initial treatment decision?
Sure. It often starts with the PPD skin test, the Mantoux test.
If that's positive.
Then you move to a chest X-ray to look for signs of active disease in the lungs.
And if the X-ray looks suspicious.
Then you need to confirm the bacteria are there. You collect sputum, maybe stomach secretions for culture. But cultures take time.
So there's a quicker test too.
Yes, the acid-fast bacillus smear test. It's much faster and can give you a preliminary confirmation, allowing for quicker isolation and treatment initiation while waiting for the full culture.
Good point. And something important for listeners dealing with international populations. The BCG vaccine.
Ah, yes. Widely used globally, less so in the U.S. It can cause a false positive on the PPD skin test.
Which can complicate screening, definitely something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk mechanisms. Why do these drug combinations work so well?
Because they attack the bacteria from different angles.
Exactly. Some inhibit protein synthesis, others mess with cell wall synthesis, and some have other unique mechanisms. It's like a multi-pronged attack.
Let's start with the big one. Isoniazid, INH. It's used the most, sometimes even alone for prevention, right?
Correct. Used for prophylaxis in people exposed, or in combination for active TB, and importantly, it's considered bactericidal.
How does it kill the slow-growing bug?
It's quite clever, actually. INH gets inside the Mycobacterium and disrupts cell wall synthesis, but also interferes with other cellular functions.
Oh.
It gets converted into a defective version of NAD, a coenzyme that's absolutely vital for the bacteria's energy production and many life-sustaining reactions.
So it basically sabotages the bacteria's internal machinery.
Pretty much cuts off its ability to build its wall and perform essential functions.
Now, INH has this interesting genetic component, the slow acetylator issue. What's that about?
It relates to how INH is broken down, metabolized in the liver. The process is called acetylation.
And some people do this slower than others.
Yes, due to a genetic variation in the liver enzymes responsible. If you're a slow acetylator, the drug isn't cleared as quickly, it builds up in your system.
Which increases the risk of side effects.
Significantly, particularly toxicity. So for slow acetylators, the dose often needs to be adjusted downwards to keep it safe. It's a real example of pharmacogenetics in practice.
And what are the main toxicities we worry about with INH?
Two big ones. Hepatotoxicity, liver damage is a major concern, and peripheral neuropathy.
Numbness and tingling.
Yes, numbness, tingling, sometimes burning sensations, usually in the hands and feet. This happens because INH interferes with vitamin B6 metabolism.
Ah, so that's why patients on INH almost always get pyridoxine, vitamin B6 supplements.
Exactly. It's given concurrently to prevent or treat that neuropathy. Very important nursing consideration.
Okay, moving to the next major player, rifampin, part of the rifamycin class. Also bactericidal.
Yes, rifampin is a broad-spectrum bactericidal agent. It works by inhibiting RNA synthesis in the bacteria, stops them from making essential proteins.
But rifampin comes with a huge flashing warning sign regarding drug interactions.
Oh, absolutely. It's a potent enzyme inducer in the liver. This is probably one of the most critical things to know about rifampin.
Let's unpack that. Potent enzyme inducer. What does that mean for the patient?
It means rifampin revs up the liver enzymes that metabolize many other drugs. So if a patient is taking rifampin alongside, say, warfarin or certain anti-seizure meds like phenytoin,
The rifampin makes the liver chew up those other drugs faster.
much faster. It dramatically lowers the blood levels of those other drugs, potentially making them ineffective. This can lead to loss of seizure control, blood clots if anticoagulation fails, things like that.
And the sources specifically highlight a major issue for women, oral contraceptives.
Yes, this is vital patient education. Rifampin's enzyme induction significantly reduces the effectiveness of hormonal birth control pills.
So, women taking rifampin need an alternative birth control method.
Absolutely. They must be advised to switch to a non-hormonal barrier method throughout the TB treatment and usually for a bit after, because the risk of unintended pregnancy is very real. It underscores the complexity managing TB treatment for months while navigating these serious interactions.
Rifampin and its cousins rifabutin, rifapentine, also have a very visible side effect.
Yes, the color change. It causes a harmless but often alarming red, orange, brown discoloration of body fluids.
Urine, tears, sweat, everything.
Pretty much everything. Urine, feces, saliva, sputum, sweat, tears. Patients need to be warned about this so they don't panic.
And the crucial clinical pearl. It can permanently stain soft contact lenses.
That's the one. Advise patients to switch to glasses during treatment. Definitely a key piece of counseling.
Okay, let's touch on ethambutol. First line, but usually bacteriostatic.
Correct. Ethambutol works by interfering with lipid synthesis, specifically making it harder for the bacteria to incorporate mycolic acid into their cell walls.
And its main drawback, the big safety concern,
Optic neuritis, inflammation of the optic nerve.
which can affect vision.
Yes, potentially severely. It can cause changes in color perception, reduced visual acuity, and in some cases, if not caught early, even blindness.
So eye exams are a must.
Baseline and regular follow-up eye exams are absolutely non-negotiable for anyone on ethambutol.
And then there's bedaquiline, relatively new kid on the block.
Yes, the first new TB drug class in something like 40 years. It has a novel mechanism of action.
What does it do?
It targets an enzyme called mycobacterial ATP synthase. Basically, it inhibits the engine that generates energy for the bacterial cell, shuts down its power supply.
And it's mainly for resistant TB.
Primarily used for MDR-TB, yes, but it's not without its own risks. It carries a black box warning for QT prolongation.
which is a risk for serious heart rhythm problems.
Exactly. Needs careful cardiac monitoring.
And how should patients take bedaquiline? Any specific instructions?
Yes, very important. It must be taken with food. Food significantly boosts its absorption.
Okay, so we had these powerful drugs, long treatment times, serious potential side effects. This really puts the nursing process front and center, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Careful nursing assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation are the foundation of safe and effective TB therapy.
So before even starting these drugs, what baseline assessments are crucial?
You need a thorough baseline. First, organ function. Liver function tests LFTs, bilirubin, and kidney function, BUN, creatinine. Many of these drugs are tough on the liver, so pre-existing problems might rule out certain drugs.
And beyond blood work, sensory function.
Definitely. A baseline neurological exam to track for peripheral neuropathy, especially with INH. A baseline eye exam, visual acuity, color vision before starting ethambutol.
Hearing test, too, if streptomycin is involved.
Yes, because streptomycin carries a risk of ototoxicity, hearing loss. And one more, a baseline uric acid level, because pyrazinamide can increase uric acid and potentially trigger gout.
Got it. So comprehensive baseline. Now, during treatment, the sources hammer home one nursing priority above all others.
Adherence. Adherence.
Adherence, because of the long duration and the risk of resistance.
Exactly. Instructions need to be crystal clear. Patients must understand they need to complete the entire 6 to 12-month course, even if they feel better way before then. Stopping early is dangerous.
And taking meds consistently.
Same time every day, exactly as prescribed. This helps maintain steady drug levels and fights resistance.
We also need to counsel on how to take them, with food, without food.
Right. It varies, but some, like bedaquiline, need food for absorption. Others might be taken with food just to minimize stomach upset. Patients need specific instructions for their particular regimen.
And monitoring for toxicity is ongoing. What signs require immediate reporting?
Patients need to know the warning signs. For liver toxicity, fatigue, jaundice, yellowing skinase, dark urine, loss of appetite, nausea, that needs an immediate call to the provider.
What about the INH neuropathy?
Numbness, tingling, burning in hands or feet, report that too. Often, adjusting the vitamin B6 dose can help manage it.
And for ethambutol?
Any changes in vision, blurred vision, difficulty distinguishing colors, any loss of sight, immediate report, that could be optic neuritis.
And the pyrazinamide risk? Gout.
Yes, if they suddenly develop hot, painful, swollen joints, especially the big toe, that could be a gout flare-up due to high uric acid. Report that promptly.
Other general safety advice?
Absolutely avoid alcohol.
Right.
It increases the risk of liver toxicity with many of these drugs. And wearing a medical alert tag stating they have TB and are on treatment is a really good idea.
So after months of this, how do we know if it's actually worked? How do we evaluate success?
We look for both clinical and objective improvement. Clinically, the patient should feel better, less cough, fever gone, maybe gaining weight back.
But feeling better isn't enough proof.
No, the definitive proof comes from objective measures. Improvement on the chest x-ray, and most importantly, negative sputum cultures. That tells you the bacteria are actually gone. And throughout, you're constantly monitoring for those adverse effects too.
Okay, let's wrap this up. If you had to boil down the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive for our listeners, what would they be?
Well, first, remember, TB is tough because it's slow growing. That dictates the need for long-term combination therapy, usually starting with those 4 first-line drugs.
Right.
Because the treatment is long and the drugs can be toxic, vigilant monitoring is essential. Especially watch the liver, nerves, and eyes. Nursing care is absolutely central to patient safety and success.
And adherence is non-negotiable.
Cannot stress that enough.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? This immense challenge of getting patients to stick to a complex, potentially toxic regimen for maybe a year, while also managing things like rifampin, making their birth control ineffective. It's pharmacology meeting real life, head on.
It truly is. It's a massive public health challenge that requires not just good drugs, but incredible patient support and education over a long timeline.
A perfect place to pause and reflect. We hope this deep dive has illuminated the complexities of treating TB. Thanks for joining us.